Hi, Dwayne.
Hi, Kino. How are you? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah. Can you hear me now? My
I can
mic
hear you
just,
well. Yes. Yep. I can hear you
yeah.
now.
My mic was on its own buzz for a second. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's a summery day here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, right in the dead center of Canada. I've been gardening most of the weekend. It's been good.
Yeah. There's a lot of discipline in gardening, eh?
There is, and we have a little community garden not far from where I live, and we grow most of what we eat in the summertime. In the winter, we're
Well,
without those vegetables.
at least you're eating organic. You know,
Yes,
that's the plus. That's the
yes,
plus. I mean, you can go to a retail store today and they will advertise that they're selling organic, but how organic is it? That's the world we live in.
yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So that's how you pronounce it. Was it Saskatoon? Saskatoon.
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 Yeah,
Yeah, well, because I was reading your bio and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to ask him how to pronounce this, before I attempt to do so myself.
it's a bit of a tongue twister because it's Saskatoon is the city and the province is Saskatchewan, which is an old Cree
Okay,
word for swift running water. There's a river that runs through the city that I'm in, and that's what
nice.
Saskatchewan means in Cree.
Nice. Yeah, you learn something new every day. I mean, I've interviewed many authors from Canada, but it's the first time, from that specific area.
Yeah,
So nice. Dwayne, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Thanks for taking up the time to join me.
my
It's going to be
pleasure.
an interesting conversation as always. And you're under Shadowpaw with Edward.
Yes, yeah, Shadowpaw
Nice.
Press. Yeah, the
Yeah,
the
no, I had
book.
the privilege of interviewing.
Oh, good. The
Yeah,
book
you're
that
interviewing Edward a few weeks ago.
yeah, the book that
Theories of
I'm
everything.
flogging
Yeah.
is theories of everything. This book had a kind of a circuitous route. It was written well. It's full of short stories that were compiled over the last 15 years. But I had sold it to a publisher, Cato Press, about 8 years ago, and the press went bankrupt before they could publish it. So I was very happy when Shadowpaw got a hold of it. Ed Willett got a hold of it, and he said, "I want to publish it because it's been a long time in the making. I've waited a
Yeah.
long time for these stories to come out."
Well, I mean, you have a special, talented publisher, behind
Yes,
you. Yeah. Nah, he's truly amazing. He's truly amazing, with his own work, with what he's doing, for authors such as yourself. So I'm curious, what leads a publisher to go bankrupt?
Ah, well, they were living a little beyond their means, from what I understand. They were perhaps publishing books that too many books based on
Yeah.
how much money they had. It was unfortunate because it had been a very successful publishing group up until then, and finally, it was about 6 months before the book was supposed to come out that I heard that they were going bankrupt.
Sure.
I'm not sure about all the details. You'd have to talk to somebody
Yeah.
at Kato Books, but yeah.
Well, I mean, like I publish music, and at times it's all about, content. But I'm lucky enough that at least I don't, I mean, that you, okay, I mean, what was it, like a proper traditional publishing deal that you had going on with them before you found out they were going bankrupt?
Yes, that's correct. They were going to. It was traditional. They're going to publish it, pay me royalties, and so forth. So it didn't cost me anything that they
Yeah.
that they went bankrupt.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
But they lost the
at least you
press.
found, Edward after that.
Oh yeah, and Edward's good. He is a Renaissance man. He writes, he publishes, he sings in a band or a
Yeah.
choir, does podcasts. I don't know where he finds
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
time.
That was one of the questions I asked him, and I said, okay, share your secret ingredients. Because, like, even when he told me his age, I'm like, no ways. no ways. And you can see how like lively he is, and so excited, and he's involved in so many projects, and it's something that's not going to end anytime soon. But I
No.
mean, that's the main thing. As long as you're enjoying what you're doing and loving what you're doing, it keeps you young at heart.
Yes, I agree with that. Yeah, I think you want to. I've recently retired from a job. I was a theater professor up until
Okay.
3 years ago, and I wouldn't have retired except I wanted to write books, and
Yeah.
I've not been busier since
Yeah.
since I retired. I just keep writing every morning, so I feel a sense of purpose. I think it keeps me young. Up until then, I had students around me who were always 20 years old, and they kept me feeling young too. But in latter years, they would kind of look at me like a wizened old grandfather. I remember a student coming in and saying that her mother had taken a class from me back in the
Yeah.
1990s, and I thought I'm maybe getting too old for this profession. so
Yeah,
I
but
decided to
you're
write
looking
full
quite
time.
fresh yourself. You're looking
Thank
quite
you.
fresh yourself, and
That's kind of
yeah,
you.
and also lively, and the laughs and the smiles are out there. That's what brings energy to this podcast. After all. So, Ed, I was about to say Edward. Dwayne.
Yeah.
So you are what we would call like an OG, in the industry. Like, I'm sure even though you had a day job, like writing was part of your life for a long time.
Yes.
It was there. So let's start there. Let's start. How did all start for you from the writing, side
Okay.
of things?
Well, I grew up on a farm. I was a farm boy. My grandfather homesteaded a quarter of land about 120 miles from where I am now. And so I didn't have a lot of books around me for the first 10 years of my life, but I got very interested in writing in high school. And I was, in fact, no good at anything else. I was terrible at science, terrible at mathematics. And so I remember my high school English teacher was a man named Terry Chamberlain, and he's also a published author. And he kind of took me under his wing and said, you should learn how to write. And so I did. And my first story, I wrote a story about a friend of mine who used to hang glide behind snowmobiles. He would get
Yeah.
I don't know if you know what a snowmobile is, but he would fly across the snow on a skis with a hang glider, and then gradually he would get up in the air with this hang glider. And so I wrote an article in high school, and I got it published in a journal. It's well known around here. It was called the Western Producer. And I remember going in to meet the publisher. It was a guy named Rusty McDonald, and he sat me down across from him, and I was like 17 years old, and he said, "So you want to be a writer?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I think you should go to Hollywood and write for the Beverly Hillbillies." I don't know if you know that program, but I'm not sure if he thought I was a hillbilly or if he thought I was a writer. But I didn't take his advice. I went to university. I thought I was going to become a phys ed teacher is what I wanted to be. I liked sports all my life, but I got involved in English classes and I liked them. And I had a creative writing professor here at the University of Saskatchewan. His name was H.V. Weeks, and he used to always say that he had the great Canadian novel in his top drawer in his desk. I always wanted to go to his house and rummage through the top drawer of his desk after he passed away, just to see if I could find that novel and get it published for him. He also wrote for a magazine called True Confessions, which was popular back in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, and it was you would confess your deepest sins, and people would get a kick out of reading it, I guess. But he said to me that he masqueraded as a woman, as a young woman, and that he was pregnant and unwed at least 15 times, and each time at $50 a story that he wrote for this magazine. So he kind of captured my imagination, this old man, and I wrote some stories in his class, some terrible ones, but finally one good one. And he said, you should send this to a publisher, and I did, and I got it published in a mainstream journal here in Saskatchewan. And then I got a scholarship to go south, to go down to the United States to be in a creative writing program. But I was talking it over with my father, who didn't make a lot of money. He was, as I say, a dryland farmer. And we realized we didn't have enough money, even with the scholarship, to send me down to the United States. So I ended up taking a graduate degree at this university. And I drove school bus while I was doing it, drove kids to school to pay for my university. And I met at university, I met a young lady who was studying to be a school teacher. She's now my wife. I used to pick her up at night in the school bus and take her to movies, although I was told by the bus company not to. I would have to find a way to hide this big yellow bus in downtown Saskatoon while we went to a movie. and we would come out of the movie, and I'd say, you can have your choice of seats, I'd say to my wife, but it's warmer back in the back where there's a heater in the back. So I was able to get her to the back of the bus. It was good. Anyway, after that, I took a theater class, and I just took it on a whim. I didn't plan on anything, but I liked it, and I ended up like 2 years later at the Stratford Festival here in Canada as an actor. And so I did that for a couple of years, and I was acting in Toronto for a couple of years. And then I came back to Saskatchewan, and I got a job teaching, but teaching in the drama department. So I spent my life teaching theater, but I always was writing. I wrote plays for myself, a couple of books of poems, and 2 novels now, and a short story collection, which is right here. I also I was lucky enough to get on to CBC Radio, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation.
Nice.
Has a really good national radio infrastructure, and I got on as a storyteller once every week, talking about life in a small prairie town from the standpoint of a prairie handyman. They were humorous stories about small town life. But I did, make a name for myself doing that, and I got onto national Christmas specials and things like that as a result. And then I gave it all up, and I thought, I want to write short stories and novels, for the rest of my life. And so that's what I've been doing, especially since retirement, but even before then.
Your life
I think
is
that's
a
pretty
movie.
much sorry, what?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. No, I said your life is a movie.
Yeah, well,
like a proper movie. Like how you explain it, I'm thinking, okay, I can watch this, on TV, and also inspiring because of, what you actually did for yourself, what you had to put in, the sacrifice. I mean, you had an opportunity to go to the US, you never see that as a defeat in your life. You just, navigated in a different direction. You say, okay, what's going to work for me? You were humble. You practice humility. And that's so important, for independent creators to have that sort of characteristics. That, look, I may want this, but this is the direction I'm supposed to go on. And not everyone's journey is the same. So you embrace that. It led you to a school bus. It led you to meeting who's your wife today, laughs around, along the way. Like, it's enjoyable. And I mean, you get into theater, and now you retired, and now you're living your dream, you're living your passion, and that's just great. You never give up on that. And this was your journey, and you embraced it so well.
Yeah. Humility is so important, especially, as a teacher. I kind of had professors who walked into the classroom and they knew everything, and students knew nothing. And I quickly realized that the students knew sometimes more than I did, and especially when it got into the age of technology. Because I'm not entirely technologically illiterate, but I'm not very good. And during COVID, of course, we had to teach online. Those were the last years of my teaching, and I would sometimes say to the students online, well, maybe you could help me figure out this problem. How do I unmute myself?
But that's the reality we're living in 2025. If you look at it, I mean, I can, mention South Africa, like the educational system is so outdated. And the reality of the matter is students have become smarter than the educators. It's just a reality, because, especially if you're in a government school, you're still learning from textbooks that was developed maybe 30 years ago. And it's irrelevant in this day and age and how the world really works. I mean, the school system doesn't even teach you how the world really works anyway. So now we got so much access. And as you mentioned, throughout the COVID period, I mean, if you were fortunate enough as a student to have a laptop, to have a tablet, or even just a smartphone, and didn't have to be a fancy smartphone, but as long as you had a phone, I mean, you could learn anything. You can still learn anything you want. And now we're living in this era of artificial intelligence as well. I mean, AI was coming a long time ago, but now it's just blown up. So, I mean, there's so much technological tools at one's hands. So the question is, where does it leave educators, of today and the future to come?
Well, it quickly became apparent as technology started to develop that lectures and memorization for exams were skills that were not really necessary in this world. You can look it up on your phone at a moment's notice. And the way I learned that was somebody asked me what year Tennessee Williams died in, and I hazarded a guess. That was 1973 or something like that, and within 15 seconds, students had their hands up and they had their phones in their hands. Said, "No, it was 1972."
Yeah, look at that. I mean, if I go on to let's just say not even ChatGPT, but I go on to Grok 3, and I search, let's just say entertainment law, and this was like, true story here. I want to learn more on entertainment law, and I want to find out the cheapest way about it. And it directs me to these sites where you can do these free online courses. And if you want a certificate, you can get a certificate. And I mean, it's courses that comes from like the biggest universities in the world. And it's all on this one website. So just look at it. I mean, the only thing, like, I'm like extremely clued up when it comes to like entertainment law, because the nature of what I do, it's good to know what is what, so an attorney doesn't take you for this long costly ride, which they love to do. And I mean, you can relate. It's the same like working with Shadowpaw and working with Edward. You're going to get that full transparency, not bringing in an attorney who's going to say, oh no, you need to pay me $20,000 a year, $10,000 a year. I'm going to get this sorted out for you. I mean, now if you're an independent publisher, you can learn it all yourself, so you know how to navigate it. It doesn't become costly, for the artist, author, musician at hand. But I mean, the amount of information I've developed or gotten online that's developed me, as an individual and part of my growth is absolutely phenomenal. And as I was saying, the only thing that I can say differentiates me from an entertainment attorney that's gone to university for a good couple of years is that they got a certificate on their wall. I don't.
Sure.
That's the only thing. But how relevant is the certificate in this day and age? So Yeah,
Yeah.
fascinating.
So,
So, like with theater, let me just touch on theater really quickly. So, like, are we talking like proper theater plays?
yeah, I mean, the Stratford Festival, it was all Shakespeare that I was involved
Nice.
in. So, and I had no particular affinity for Shakespeare. I had to learn a lot about it, but I was
Mm.
just a kid, right? And I was maybe 22 years old when I was at the festival. That year, Maggie Smith was there. I don't know if you know these actors, but Maggie Smith, Peter Ustinov, Jessica Tandy, Edna O'Brien was there as a playwright, writing plays. So I got to meet all of these people, and I remember, being a kid in my hometown, and we would one winter, a movie called Blackbeard's Ghost came out, and it starred Peter Ustinov as the ghost of the pirate Blackbeard. And that's all I knew of Peter Ustinov until I got to the Stratford Festival, and there he was. And he was the most friendly guy. I mean, you talk about humble, nice people.
Mm,
He
mm, mm.
was, I was I had very few lines as an actor at the age of 22 at the festival. He played King Lear. I played the soldier that kills Cordelia in that play. And, but he would, backstage, he found out that I was of Norwegian ancestry, and he would only speak Norwegian to me. And a buddy of mine was of Italian ancestry. He was from Toronto. Ustinov would turn to him and only speak Italian to him. He knew about 6 languages, this man. And he would see you at a restaurant or in a grocery store, and he'd come over and clap you on the shoulder or wave at you. He was just a really genuinely nice guy. Uh, uh, you know, I would love to aspire to be as nice a man as he was. But
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
that was that was yeah that was the theater for me. Since then I've acted in a few movies. In Canada, our Canadian dollar is not worth as much as an American dollar, so the American companies love to come up here, and they save about 25% on their budget if they
Wow.
come up here and shoot their movies here, which is something I think Donald Trump is trying to avoid in the near future. But for the time being, it was very good for us. And I would get a call and audition and be in a movie. I was in a movie with Brenda Fricker, who just won an Academy Award for the movie My Left Foot. And Kelly McGillis was in that film as well. I got to rub shoulders with all these guys and just have a great time. I was telling somebody recently, just how well you're treated on a movie set. They kowtow,
Yeah.
even if you don't have lots of lines, they kowtow to your every need. There's a craft table where they've always got hors d'oeuvres and stuff to eat. And I was in one scene where I had to smoke a cigar, and they gave me the nicest Cuban cigars to smoke. And I
Yeah.
remember coming home after 3 days on that set, and my family treated me just as families treat, like I have three
Yeah. Yeah.
sons, three sons and a wife, and they treated me just as they normally would. But I remember thinking, why aren't they kowtowing to my every need? I just walked in the door. Why am I not being offered a cigar? You get a little spoiled on a movie set, but
Yeah.
so yeah, I got to do a few of those things. I acted with Mia Sara in a movie called The Impossible Elephant. She had just been in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, which was a great movie if you've ever seen it. Yeah, so there was that. Since then, I've acted in this town in Saskatoon, and I played the Scottish gentleman at the Shakespeare Festival here in Saskatoon back a few years ago now. But as I say, of late, mostly it's been about writing.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I'm just going to emphasize again, your life is a true movie.
Well,
I
I think
wasn't
everybody's
expecting that.
is.
Yeah, I really wasn't expecting that. But I mean, you're still flowing well. Do you see yourself in movies anytime soon again? Maybe, possibly?
I still get calls to audition, and
Mm.
occasionally I'll accept those calls. And I just auditioned for a film recently, which I didn't get. I keep telling my students that sometimes no matter how well you audition, it's you don't part your hair the way they wanted you to, or you don't look like
Yeah,
their second cousin who's ever directing that movie, and you just never know. You don't get the part. But I always say, or I said to my students, the way you approach it is you walk in the door and say, I don't have this job now, so if I don't have it 5 minutes from now, there's no loss. And
yeah,
it
yeah,
kind of takes the sting out of auditioning because, as you know, it's frankly the most brutal way to get a job is to stand in front of somebody with your body and your voice, and what they're rejecting is your body and your voice if they reject you. But it's often about more than that. I auditioned for a film one time in Toronto back in the day, sort of in 1982 or something like that. And the guy said, I auditioned for him, and he said, "I love you." He said, "You look just like," it was a detective movie, and he said, "You look just like a detective that we interviewed back in New York City." And he said, "I'm going to give you a call back." And it was a month later. And in the meantime, my hair had grown, and I thought I'd better go get a haircut. And so actually got a fancy haircut. And I walked back into the audition room, and the director said, "Who are you?" And I said, I'm the guy you said looked like the detective, from New York City." And he said, "You don't look anything like that guy," he said to me. So I didn't get that part either. But it's like, well, I mean, writing. I don't imagine the music industry is any different than this. I mean, you have to get used to rejection. You have to accept
yep, yep,
failure and learn from it. And
yeah.
there's certainly been lots of failure in my life. I grew up playing baseball as a kid, and I learned a lot about failure playing that sport. There's a lot of failure involved in that, and so I'm not
Well,
really afraid of it.
yeah, with every failure comes a lesson learned, if you look at it in that way.
Yeah,
you know I mean, even though you focusing on your writing now, like full time, but
yeah,
what I've gathered is that you've had an enjoyable creative life, from theater to movies. It was enjoyable,
it was.
which leads me back to what I said earlier on. Imagine if you did go and you took on the scholarship in the US at that time. You wouldn't have experienced what you've experienced now till date.
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
you
yeah,
wouldn't.
yeah. I just, I have to say, I just followed my joy. I went where I could enjoy myself.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't know, you can't second guess it. Sometimes it leads you to places where you don't want to be, and sometimes not. But it never felt like work all the time. I was working full time and trying to write. It never really felt like work because it's enjoyment. I just thought of it as, well, I'm going to my hobby now when I went into work, and I still feel the
Yeah.
same way when I come to write. I spend, this is the room that I write in, and I spend like 3 hours a day, usually in the mornings in here writing, and I just I'm going to do my hobby now, and that's the way I approach it.
Yeah, but what you just said, about the music industry being the same. I mean, if you look at the whole entertainment industry, there's like radical change, happening. But I love what you said, that you got to get used to rejection. You don't give up when you get rejected. You just keep pushing. I mean,
Yeah,
successful brands, big tech companies, they've been rejected 100 times, 130 times. Google, for example, and look where they are today. The founder of Canva, which is a tool that's used by creators all over the world today. I mean, she was rejected about 100 times, before she
Wow.
found investors. So you have to get used to it. And I mean, when we look at the movie scene at the moment, in my honest opinion, Hollywood is at a decline. You're
Yeah.
not getting the same quality any longer. It's just like
Yeah.
fading away. Now, when you look at what Netflix is pushing out and all these independent publishing companies are doing, it's crazy. And I mean, the same goes for, the
Yeah.
writing world or the music world. I mean, the
Yeah.
independent market is climbing day by day. So if you're in that
Hmm.
space and you're embracing the change and you're learning and utilizing the tools available to you and using social media responsibly, not to post about my girlfriend or boyfriend breaking up with me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're heading in the right direction. You're really heading
Yeah.
in the right direction. It's going to take time, but you just have to be patient. If there's anything I've learned, patience is everything. Have
Hmm.
that desire, back it up by faith, and just be patient. You
Yeah.
know, maybe it
We're
won't work
fortunate.
out today or tomorrow or next month or next year, but this is what I love to do. So I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah.
And once
Yeah.
again, let's bring up the word humility. That's what brought me so far, just humility.
Yeah. Yeah. We're fortunate here that we have a alternative movie theater in this city, and so this is the theater that I go to all the time. And I don't, as you say, a lot of mainstream movies I'm not interested in. But I just
Yeah,
saw
yeah.
a movie called Secret Mall Apartment, which is a documentary about a bunch of artists who stole into a mall and created an apartment for themselves and lived there for 4 years without being discovered down in Providence, Rhode Island. I just thought it was one of the best movies I've seen all year. You know,
Yeah, yeah. But
but yeah,
that's ambitious, for them to
yeah,
do.
you should see it. It's a lovely film,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah, no, definitely. Like like I don't have a TV. Like I sold my TV because it became a distraction, and I don't like mainstream news, you know. So, but I do
Mhm.
watch certain movies now and again. But if there's some sort of value in it as well, for me,
Yeah,
not just watching like rubbish. Like
yeah.
I'll be honest with you, I've never been like for a live theater show ever. I
Oh,
want
sure.
to,
Yeah,
I want to go,
yeah.
but in South Africa, you don't get much of those, and if you do, it's probably hidden somewhere that I don't know
Okay,
about.
okay.
But I would love that, listen, not listening, but watching the movies where there's Broadway and
Yeah.
all those things. And I mean, even like I gotta ask, like working on Shakespeare plays, which is your favorite?
Oh, I think it probably still is. Well, I shouldn't say that. I liked Much Ado About Nothing, and I would go see a production of that any time. As a student here, you get so much of Hamlet that
Yeah,
every time somebody does Hamlet, I say, yeah, staying away from that. I've just seen it, 20 times, I think. But I mean, King Lear has to be up there. It's however very dark. As somebody once said, the saddest lines in
yeah.
in poetry come from King Lear, and it's when Lear is holding his dead daughter, and he just says, "Never, never, 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 never," and it's the saddest thing. So
So just by
yeah,
you
King
saying it, it
Lear.
sounds sad.
Yeah, I like The Winter's Tale a lot, and it's because it was written late in Shakespeare's career, and you could almost take any line out of there and make it the title of your next novel. It's just
Yeah.
every line seems it's like a honed jewel. It's amazing. But
Yeah.
I like other playwrights too. I like Martin McDonagh. I was fond of South African puppetry. I understand the South Africans were the puppet masters who were behind the TV or the stage show Warhorse, which is wonderful puppetry. It's just I actually used to take students to London now and then, and we would do workshops, and we did workshops with the puppetry team from Warhorse. And what we
Okay.
did, yeah, we did is they gave us they would get us in groups of three and give us dowels. Two people had dowels in each hand, They were just, 4 feet long, and somebody had a balloon, and the balloon became the head of the horse. The dowels at the front became the front legs. The dowels at the back became the back legs. And you would have sworn an hour into that workshop that those were real horses. They had us moving the way, breathing the way horses breathe. And it was amazing. And it was a South African company, I believe, that was involved in all of that. So yeah, there's a good theater tradition there.
You know what's the sad part about it? There's like so much culture going on this side of the world, so much history, but more of the international community knows about it than the people that actually, stay in the country or the continent, because it's never spoken about, it's never shown, as I said, to find a proper live play, it's hard, it's difficult.
Wow.
I haven't come across one, not the ones I see on movies. So, but I mean, politics is politics. It is what it is. Yeah. So, Dwayne, I mean, this first, the last 30 minutes or 36 minutes, it's been amazing getting to know you as a person, someone who's lived such an amazing life. So let's talk about theories of everything now. Let's talk about the book.
Oh, sure.
The first question is like, what fascinates you about short stories?
Well, I love to write them. I love to read them too. I actually, before I wrote this book, I had short stories at my bedside every night, and I would read a short story before I went to sleep. And it was just a nice way to get ready to go to sleep. But I love writing them partly because it's more instant gratification. If you're working on a novel or even a book of poems, it's a slog. You're into it for years often. My first novel, took years to write, and in a short story, you could actually, if it's good, you can finish one in 3 days, although it takes me longer than that. But a first draft I could get done in a week of a short story, and then I have this thing in front of me, and it's there. So it's that instant gratification. They're harder, however, to get published. I got to say that. There's what happens here in Canada and in the United States is there's all these creative writing MFAs going on now, and students enter them. And of course, the thing that most of them do is write short stories. That's the way they get their training. And these short stories, they'll often have 15 pairs of eyes on them over 2 years' time. They're often very good. So you're competing against, all those people who come out of creative writing MFAs with their short stories, and they're trying to get published too. So it's glutted the market for short stories, and especially for a book like mine, which is titled Theories of Everything, because none of the stories are linked. They're all set in different parts of the world. Some are narrated by women, some by men, one by a murderous parrot. And so it's all over the place. It's a theories of everything. It's a compilation rather than a linked book. So it was tough to get it published in the first place, and I almost thought it wasn't going to be published until Ed saw it and picked it up. So there was that. But I mean, more than that, I mean, short story is just as simple as, for me, as starting with two characters who have different values in life, or who are for some reason in opposition, and then seeing how they interact. And often when I write them, I don't know how the story is going to end when even when I'm halfway through sometimes. And so I'm a bit of a seat of the pants writer, but I like that about it too. I like the conciseness. I like the fact that you have to be, very strong in your use of language and your use of verbs, especially in a short story. that you can only suggest in a short story what a novel can reveal over a long period of time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are the things I like about short stories, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you made some good points about short stories. Even to read a novel, it can take you some time to finish the novel. And if
Oh,
you, like me, who can get impatient while reading, you like I have a book here, I'll have a book
yeah,
here, I'll have a book here, and I want to get through all of it because if I'm reading this book, I'm not going to read this now 3 days in a row, I want to switch it up a bit. So I'll move to that book and then I'll come back to this book. Now I've got to remember, okay, oh yes, that was the part in the story. Right. Now,
yeah,
memory is back and then you move on. So it makes
yeah.
sense. And what's like the longest story in the book?
The longest story is probably a story about a professor who's not who's not doing well. He's a mediocre professor trying to teach a religious studies course at a university that looks suspiciously like the university just down the road from me. And I mean, the students are in rebellion against him. And at the same time, he's attending a hiring of a new faculty member, and he encounters somebody with a more Zen approach to life, a Japanese religious studies scholar who comes in and shows a film in his interview. Shows a film, and the film is Kung Fu Panda, and it's that scene where the panda has to discover the secret of life, and he pulls it down from the roof, and on the paper is nothing. There's no secret, and you know,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's something I had to learn a long time ago. Is just to expect nothing and appreciate everything. you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's what this guy learns in this story is to expect nothing and to appreciate everything. And it ends with him walking into a classroom, and he's suddenly in the moment, and he's given up his lecture notes that are tattered and 20 years old, and he's in the moment, and the students are in the moment with him. And yeah, that's the longest story in the
Yeah.
piece.
But I mean, reading about you and the book, I mean, you got that human touch to it. When I quote this, I got it here in front of me. Your stories are featuring characters struggling with the challenges of being human.
Yeah,
Okay? And
yeah,
then also struggles of the human heart.
yeah,
That now, resonated with me. So are we
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about like each one of your stories? I mean, your character development. You see it as, I know that, okay, parrot that murders, there's that imagination that's going on there, which is lovely. It's great. You ran with the first thought that came to your mind and it works, and more
yeah,
creators need to do that. But is there like this dotted line also to non-fiction of what you see like happening in the surroundings, in the world,
yeah.
that sort of like, dictates, okay, how the story is going to unfold, even in a fiction way?
Yeah, I was just talking about this. I'm in a writers group with two, well, they're well-known writers here, David Carpenter and David Margoshes, and we were just talking about this last month, and how we choose to invent as little as possible. How the stories, even the parrot story. The parrot is, she actually has the character of an aunt of mine, an auntie of mine. Although this aunt wasn't murderous in any way, but she's kind of got that feistiness about her. So everything's based on life somehow. I mean, there's one story in here about my grandfather, and it's fiction, but it starts with the true kernel of the story. And my
Yeah.
my grandmother my grandmother was a rather formidable woman. she she didn't nobody talked back to her. And she in the 1930s during the Depression, she was about to lose her sewing machine. She had a sewing machine that she'd bought from a local general store, but she couldn't pay for it because it was the 1930s. And they came out to the farm, and the repo man tried to take it away from her. And my mother was there watching this. She was a little girl, and she told me this story. And she said that my grandmother folded her arms in front of her and said to the repo man that if he was going to take the sewing machine, he'd have to be a better man than she was. and
I love that.
The repo man went away without the sewing machine.
If only we could all be like that in this day and age, you know what I mean? Have that sort of courage.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
these days
yeah.
the repo man shows up, or an official shows up, or the police show up, you know, you're like all scared and worried, you know?
Yeah.
Love your grandmother.
Yeah. It's different in different countries, but you know, I know there's reasons to be afraid of the police in many places in the world.
Yeah, definitely. But you know, there's also a point where you have to like draw the line, you know, because nowadays, you know, I'm speaking, you know, from this side of the world, like they just in it for the wrong reasons, you know. They're not fighting the crime that matters or the battles that matter most, you know. Let's take the easy task on, take bribes wherever we can, and boom, that's it, you know. Unfortunately, you know, and you know, going back to the chat we had about, you know, educators in the present and in the future. I mean, we're becoming more educated than the police, you know, because now we know the law, we know the constitution, you know, we know global policies, you know. So
it's an interesting dichotomy for me. My dad, my father desperately wanted to be a police officer when he wanted to join the RCMP. I don't know if you've seen pictures of the RCMP, but they show up in a red scarlet tunic. They look very fancy. And my dad, if he had his druthers, would have been that, but his father kind of forced him to stay on the farm, and so he never did it. But my father would sometimes talk about that dream that he had that he never got to live out, and you know, he really didn't live it out, and probably, you know, for me and my brother and sisters, he had to stay on the farm. So, but on the other hand, he didn't have to go beat people up or anything like that because he wasn't a police officer.
But it seems like, you know, he had true passion for it, and he had passion for law enforcement, you know, not just wanting to get in it for the sake of getting into it. And I mean, like he also made sacrifices, and I mean, that's just a run in your bloodline, you know. There's that pickup, you know, with you, which is great, you know, great characteristics to have all the way through life. So theories of everything is sorry, no, you can say what you were saying.
Oh, I was just going to say, you're absolutely right, though. I mean, a police officer's got to be in it for the right reasons, or else.
I mean, it's just like being in healthcare. I think this was on a show last week that we talked about, you know, nurses and GPs or surgeons in healthcare. You know, you have to be in healthcare for the right reasons. If you're not there for the right reasons and to actually help someone, you know, you in it for the paycheck at the end of the day, then you're not really helping that person.
No.
You know, and then we look at the past generations, you know, how in it they actually were versus, you know, my age group today. You know, it's more like, okay, after high school, okay, I'm going to go study to be a nurse or a doctor. I'm going to become, you know, a cop. But you're looking, okay, what's the pay like? You know, what's the pay like? I mean, this is public service, you know, so what's the pay like is last on that list on why you want to do it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know what the situation is where you are, but where I am, you know, hospitals are understaffed, and it's getting to be, you know, a lot of people don't have family doctors anymore. Things like that.
Yeah, it's
You know,
actually it's
so
sad. It's really sad. And these are things that there shouldn't even be a question mark there.
yeah,
From the
yeah,
government, any government, where they short stuff. It's the same, yeah. Short stuff. I mean, if I go to one of the public hospitals, I mean, if you don't have, medical care or medical aid, you know, you have to go to a government facility and they really don't care. I mean, I walked in there once and I mean, you see people lying on the benches, lying on the car, on the floor, they
oh
just
boy,
got like this cheap bandages and and the amount of people that actually die in hospital versus outside is actually higher. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like something's wrong.
yeah,
And I mean, if you have to go see a private doctor or go to a private hospital, I mean, it's a lot of money. And if
I see.
you are earning like minimum wage, you just can't afford it. You really just can't
Yeah,
afford it.
yeah,
So yeah, but the more we like, I mean, I know this podcast is about getting to know you. It's about theories of everything, but the stuff we mention outside the box of the conversation, does go a long way, especially with podcasts. It's
sure.
decentralized. You can't control what is said, yeah, but just mentioning about it or talking about it, it's going to get other people thinking, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
that makes
absolutely.
sense.
My
Yeah.
old grandfather used to say to me that you should never go to the hospital because that is the place where people die. And when he was 86, he said to me, I was 16 at the time, and he said, "I need you to drive me to the hospital." And I knew he was going to die, and he died 3 days later.
Sure. Wow.
So don't
Yeah,
go to
no,
a hospital.
so that's the message coming from
Yeah.
Dwayne. Take it to heart, listen to what he's saying. So theories of everything, it's released. Where can people get it online? Where is it available? And is it
It's
available in Kindle as well?
Yeah, it's available both ways, and it's all through Amazon. You can also write, of course, Shadowpaw Press in Regina, but that would involve freight charges and things like that. So I would advise people to go through Amazon, and the Kindle version is rather inexpensive. Uh, I like reading books, but I like the paper in front of me.
Like to hold it, yeah.
But but that's yeah. Amazon would be the place to get it in South Africa.
Yeah, no, 100%. No, I always bring up, is there a Kindle version because, as you said, it's cheaper. And if you want to access it, straight away, boom,
Yeah,
it's done for
yeah,
you. I also prefer like physical books, like I
yes,
love
me
holding
too.
a book, chilling, reading instead of being like, in front of the screen or like,
Yeah,
you know. So, I
yeah,
mean, like I got more physical than I have like online. There's a book. I had a PDF copy of this book, I think, for like a year, and I never go into it. Even though I want to read this book, I never go into it. And then I ended up
no.
coming across the physical copy, and I got it for like a really good price. And wouldn't you believe it? I'm reading it now. Is it that feeling? Is that feeling?
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
A friend of mine showed me a Kindle reader, and that looked pretty user friendly. I thought, oh, I could probably read a book on that if I could afford a Kindle reader. But
yeah.
I so far I prefer to take books out of the library and read them that way.
Yeah, 100%, and it's so much more enjoyable going through, like even my Kindle library, there's books there that I've started that I still need to finish because, like, I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
really don't want to be scrolling right now, But
Well, I
yeah,
don't
it
know
is
if you're
what it
like
is.
yeah, I don't know if you're
Oh,
like
sorry.
me, but my theory is there are way too many books in the world to read, and if
Yeah,
I get to page 20 on a book and I'm not interested, I put it down and I rarely come back to it. There are many books like
yeah,
that I've just that's it. I'm not
yeah,
interested,
yeah,
and
yeah.
so I go on to something else. Just too much to do, too much,
100%.
too many books to read.
Yeah. And also, like, I tend to check, like, what book can I mention? So I got this book. It's called something dictators or powerful, the most powerful dictators of the world.
Okay.
So when it comes to dictatorship, it started from the Roman Empire. So I got the book, but I only wanted to read about the Roman Empire, which was the foundation, of the book. And then I
Sure.
skipped 120 pages, and then I read about Hitler, and that was it. Book is done.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean,
Yeah. So
I'm a
depending some
fan
books,
of
I'll be
that.
like, even like motivational books, I'll be like, okay, let's just say, for example, hypothetically speaking, maybe discipline. Let me use discipline. So I'm like, okay, there's a chapter on discipline. I'll read the chapter on discipline. Okay, book down.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
That's
No,
how
I
I
do
am.
that too. I read
Yeah,
selectively often and just, what I want. I have to say,
yeah,
the
yeah,
internet, I write a lot of historical fiction, and the internet has been very helpful in that regard because I'm working on a piece, it's a Western novel, and I needed to know about an Enfield handgun. And you can just look it up on the internet now, and it's like, this is what they look like, this is how they behave in your hand, and so forth.
yeah,
And so it's just a wonderful tool for writers. I don't use like Chat GPT or anything like that, but I do use it as a research method all the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's how you're supposed to be using it as an author or any form of creative. Don't use it to write the whole book.
No. Yeah.
you know, tell your story and be organic about it.
Yeah.
So this
No,
novel that
absolutely.
you mentioned, is that what's next in the pipeline for you after Theories of Everything?
Yeah, I'm working on two things. Like you say, sometimes you get off in two different directions, but one is a Western novel, but it's also a murder mystery, and I'm working on
Nice.
that right now. The other piece is a little bit of a memoir, and I never thought I would write a memoir, but it's just about 1 year in my life. When I was 28, I got a job, and I was teaching English at the time, and I got a job teaching in northern Saskatchewan, in a Métis town in northern Saskatchewan. And when you talk about learning more from your students than you are giving them in your teaching, that happened there. And so I would travel up to this town and live in a trailer. It was in the far north. It was always cold, as I recall. You'd have to drive across an ice road on the lake to get to the town. And I just learned so much from people doing it,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it's like that conundrum I was talking about earlier. When I started, I thought, I have so much to teach, and this is going to be so valuable to my students. And in the end, I felt like I had so much to learn, and I still feel that way a little bit about going into the North Country here in Canada and meeting people there. But it was I don't know, it was just such a tremendous learning experience for me that I thought I'm about halfway through this memoir, and I thought I'd write a book about it. We'll see if anybody wants to publish it. I hate to talk about things that I'm just working on because, the chances are that, somebody's going to say, no, I'm not going to publish that thing. So, I like to wait until they're published usually to talk about them. But you asked, and so, yeah, this is what I'm
Yeah, yeah.
currently doing. Yeah.
But it means that you're passionate about what you want to write, you know.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you know to publish it, do it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
That's the era we live in. If no one wants to publish it, cool, do
Yeah.
yourself. I mean, from what I've gathered and learned about your phenomenal life, throughout this conversation, is that you should write a novel or a book about your whole life.
No,
From
I
growing
think I've
up,
just
getting into theater, writing. I mean,
I think I just hit all the high points. I don't think it's that interesting a life. Maybe that 1 year that I was talking about is interesting,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
but
Go for it. Go for it. Dwayne, are
well,
you online? Are you on social media?
I'm on LinkedIn, and I do have a website. It's just www.DwayneBrenna, all lowercase.com. And there you can see, well, as much as you want to learn about me, you can see on that on that website. Yeah, that's mostly where I deal with people, but certainly LinkedIn. If people want to get in touch with me that way,
Yeah.
that's the way to do it.
If there's anything I've gathered from authors, is LinkedIn and website. Those are
Yeah.
our effective platforms, Yeah.
Yeah.
That works for the writing community. I was just thinking before I came onto the show today, how much I've learned from authors and publishers and editors on the show. Like the writing industry is on its own buzz.
Yeah.
A world out there that no one really knows about, and it's booming. And I'm so grateful. I'm grateful for Mickey. I'm grateful for Edward. I'm grateful for you. Coming on and allowing me the privilege and honor to have you on the show to learn and educate independent artists. And in the same breath also promote your brand, your story, your book. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. I very much appreciate your giving me the chance to do this. So thank you for setting up a platform for all of us.
No, 100%. We just keep pushing forward from here. The show wouldn't be anything, and I say this all the time, it wasn't for authors, such as yourself, coming on, because you made me laugh throughout the show, and that's good. That's good, and that's the relationship, like why I always start each show with, the author explaining the history is because, you're building that intimate relationship with the person. You're getting to know that person. And that's the era we're living in now, that human connection. So I can connect with you, boom. That's how, as an author, you keep building your community. And no matter what book you push out, your community is going to be there to support you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we're really living in a global village when you and I can talk in real time, from South Africa to Saskatchewan.
It's great. It's great. I'm loving it. Dwayne, is there any last words from your side?
I don't have any. I don't know. I think I've said every pearl of wisdom that I have. So, but thank you again.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you for sharing that wisdom. Thank you for being an inspiration for creators all around the world.
Well, thank you.
Okay, Dwayne, enjoy the rest of your sunny day. And
I will.
Who knows, down the line, we will be chatting again soon, when the next book is out.
Yeah. Okay. We'll make a date to do
that.
See you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye now.